You're listening to NorthWoods Church Matters, a podcast of NorthWoods Church in Evansville, Indiana, where we discuss why the local church matters and things that matter to the local church. I'm your host, Matt Higgins. Well, welcome back to the NorthWoods Church Matters podcast. I've really been enjoying our current series where we've been talking about different people's stories in our church. And tonight I've got, I think, our fifth elder that we've interviewed. We got Mr. Mike Miller. He has a fascinating job. I was really surprised and shocked when I learned this for the first time, that jars and lids are made in different factories. Yeah. That completely blew my mind, but it makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, Mike, what is your current job that you have?
I'm a manager of the litho department at Silga Enclosures, and we make jar lids for Ragu, Smuckers, Prego, you name it, Mount Olive pickles. We make them. In my area is we bring the steel in, cut it, we coat it, print it, and then the other department stamps it out. We make all kinds of metal jar lids.
What I think is fascinating, too, is just the ways that companies haggle over whether lids are done correctly or not.
You don't realize how much goes into making just a jar lid.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in metal decorating for over 40 years, and I made the small bottle caps where I worked before, and now I'm making the jar lids, but printing on metal's been something I've done for many years.
That's awesome. Well, let's go way back in the Wayback Machine. So where did you grow up?
I never lived in town until I was married. So I grew up in the country about 5 miles outside of Waynetown, Indiana, which is just west of Crawfordsville, the county seat of Montgomery County. Went to grade school there in Waynetown until the four schools in the northern half consolidated. So when we got to high school, we all came together. But in grade school and middle school, it was a smaller group.
How many people about were in your school?
Couldn't tell you. Waynetown, I know my graduating class was about 177.
Yeah, so that's pretty small.
Yeah.
Everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, for the most part.
So what do you remember from your childhood?
Well, because we lived in the country, we actually lived on a dead-end road where the Interstate 74 had cut the property in half when my grandparents owned it. Mm-hmm. And the farms around us, the people were mostly older. So there was no other kids. So at home, it was playing with brothers and sisters because that was it. There was nobody else around.
Yeah.
Our church was about 12 miles away. It was in a different community, and so we'd see those guys every Sunday, Wednesday, but it wasn't like you made connection during the week or during the summer to travel, to spend a lot of time. It wasn't like going down the neighborhood and playing with a friend.
Like you could ride your bike down the block and see your friends. That just didn't
happen for me.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have an older sister. She's 2 years older than me. I have a younger sister who's 5 years younger and a brother that's 8 years younger.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there was four of us.
You finally got another boy in the family.
Yeah. It's funny because when we got married, you look at the wedding pictures and he looks like a little tiny kid because he was 8 years younger.
Like, who's that kid at the wedding? So what was your first experience with church like?
Well, I grew up in church. My dad was a deacon most of my life that I can remember. It was a small independent Baptist church. We were there every Sunday, every Wednesday night, every special service. Going to church is what I grew up with. That's what I knew.
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad, he'd held a few different jobs, but he was a general supervisor at a gate factory that made farm gates. He'd done some other things. He'd worked in lumberyard once and spent some time there, but he did a few different things because when the gate factory closed, he had to find something, and he was a little older at the time, so he drove for the county highway, plowed snow in the wintertime.
Oh, wow.
So that was different.
That's quite a switch.
It was.
Did he do the working man style gates or the fancy gates?
They had wood gates that you put the wood planks across with metal seal, and then they had all steel gates. Mm-hmm. And I worked there before I went to college. And actually, when I left college, I worked there for a little bit, making gates.
Yeah. I learned in Wyoming that it's a big deal. Those entrance gates now, that's a big standard of wealth or your status to have one of those big ranch gates up there. So what were you like as a teenager?
When I was early teenager, I played some sports in junior high, but then my parents had transportation issues. So when I got into my freshman high school, I didn't get to participate. By the time I got my license, I was like, well, am I behind everybody? So I was actually a student manager for football and basketball because it's like I felt like I was behind. Looking back, I kind of regret that I didn't try to play. Mm-hmm. But my friends, good friends, were also involved with the student manager. So we spent a lot of time together doing those things. While the guys were practicing, we were doing stuff. So.
While they were knocking each other out, y'all were.
And then we were involved in the church. I remember as a teen, They have different independent churches come together for youth rallies and stuff, and they do Bible drills and stuff and quizzing. And between church and school, we had friends in both, but they didn't always combine together.
How did you come into a relationship with Jesus?
When I was in VBS, probably about in the first or second grade, I had a friend there, and when they gave an invitation, I saw him raise his hand. He went forward, and so I did too. So I went through the process, but a few years later, I really realized I didn't really have a clue what I was doing.
Yeah.
And we had a watch night service on New Year's Eve, and you would get together, usually start about 7 or 8 o'clock. They'd have music, they'd have food, a sermon, they'd have a movie.
Mm-hmm.
That movie that night was very intense about coming to Christ. Of course, you don't go until after midnight. You go home, try to sleep. I couldn't sleep. And so I realized this. I didn't really understand what I was doing, and I really hadn't accepted Christ. And so I go downstairs and wake my mom up. and we sit and pray.
In the middle of the night.
Middle of the night.
Yeah.
Early morning, actually, and I accepted Christ when I was about 15.
Probably the only time that she was thankful she got woken up in the middle of the night.
Probably, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you and Darren actually have a similar story. That used to be big in youth groups at our age, is the scary movies that kind of scare you to Jesus.
Yeah, that's exactly what
type of movies. These kids died in a car wreck, and now they've all gone to hell. Or
mine is a house caught on fire, and I died. I mean, for some reason, that fire stuck in my mind.
Wow.
If this house got on fire and I was asleep and dying in my sleep, I'm not going to go to heaven.
Yeah. So you were 15 years old when that happened. So how did you meet your wife, Karen?
I went to Tennessee Temple schools. It turned into Tennessee Temple University later. When I was a freshman there, I went to Bible school. In my second year, I transferred to the college, and Karen was there my second year. I had a friend, Becky, and she told me the first semester, she goes, well, I'll introduce you to some girls. I said, okay, well, it never really happened because I started dating a girl, and we dated into the second semester, and then that didn't work out. And so one night I called her up. I said, where's all these girls you were going to introduce me to? And she goes, well, wait a minute. And so next thing I know, Karen's on the phone. And so
just put you on the phone with random girl.
She didn't know. She thought maybe it's from some of her family or something had called. And so I apologized. I said, hey, I had no part of this as far as expecting that they were going to put her on the phone. And so we talked for a little bit. She was willing to talk to me. And then we set up our first date. And so it was a blind date because I'd never seen her. I talked to her, but never seen her. And so after we went on a date, we were together. That was like a month left in school. We were together about every day. In the end of April, we met. In October 20th that year, we got married. Because she was from Iowa and Indiana. And I would travel out to see her about every 3 weeks. Of course, there was no cell phones back then.
Yeah.
There was one month she had like a $72 phone bill, and I had a $90-some phone bill.
Which was a lot.
It was a lot back then.
Yeah.
And it's like, we can't keep doing this. Because originally we were going to get married in June, and we moved it up to October.
You just couldn't wait. That's awesome. That's pretty cool. So, as a non-Iowan, what do you think of Iowa?
Iowa's okay. The travel through Illinois, I don't care for that.
Yeah, Iowa's got some cool spots in it, actually.
Yeah, it actually does. You think of Iowa as being as flat and everything, but it's kind of got some rolling hills and some interesting landscape. But it's got some flat spots.
Yeah, I like Des Moines a lot. Actually, that's a pretty neat city. But you're right. Southern Illinois is the most boring place on planet Earth.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people listening who may have been born in Southern Illinois, but you're probably not living there anymore. All right, so you used to be a wrestling coach, right?
Well, not a coach. My boys got into wrestling in junior high.
Yeah.
And then the school decided to get into the summer programs, which was Olympic-style wrestling, freestyle, and Greco-Roman. They started a local club, and we were helping with that. And we'd go to these tournaments on Saturdays, and you'd be there all day. And so you're just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting for our son's bouts to come up. So they were always needing help. We got involved in the setting up, the pairing side of setting up the bouts, handling the bout sheets when they came in. And we actually got to the national level on that, and where we were participating in Fargo, North Dakota. They have a junior and cadet, which is basically high school kids. It's a big, big program. They run 22 mats.
Wow.
And so
at the same time?
Yeah. They run 22 mats for about 10 days, do a Greco-Roman tournament, and then they do the freestyle tournament. When we stopped, I was real close to having to run that tournament.
Wow. So was there a lot of weight shenanigans in your house? Gaining weight, losing weight?
No, my boys were more to the heavier side. And so they wrestled pretty much where they fell. Actually, Brian, my youngest son, 1 year decided to go down a weight class in high school. And hindsight, looking back, he should just stayed where he's at.
Right.
He didn't have to work real hard at getting the lower weight, but he just wasn't as effective at the lower weight.
Yeah.
He actually made it to state his senior year.
Yeah. So the other thing I know about Mike Miller that's interesting is you're into geocaching.
Yes.
What is geocaching?
Geocaching is like treasure hunting.
Yeah.
But the treasure you find is a piece of paper in a container, and you sign your name on it that you found it. A guy started this out in Oregon or Washington, I can't remember which one, as a college project. He went and hid this thing in the woods and gave coordinates, GPS coordinates, for someone to go find it. In the woods, GPS will get you to about a 16-foot radius if you don't have any problems. There's a lot of places to hide something of 16-foot radius.
Yeah.
Our boys started it, and Karen and I said, man, we ought to see what this is about. They've kind of dropped off, and we've
kept on going.
We've kept on going. We've got over 5,300 finds.
Wow.
In 26 states.
How many countries?
One.
Well,
Ecuador. Count Ecuador.
Yeah.
Not counting United States, Ecuador. That was great when I was on a mission trip that I was able to get 2 geocaches there.
Really? Where were they at?
Can't remember the name of the town, but it was a container that was stuck in the wall on a mural.
Oh.
I was able to get it. And the other one was a virtual one just at the equator.
Oh,
you had to answer certain questions and prove that you were there.
Yeah.
And so those were the 2 I was able to get in Ecuador.
Well, that's pretty cool. What's the funnest geocache that you found or most memorable?
My most interesting geocache experience, around Christmas, I went out to USI to get one that I hadn't been able to get with the students there because you want to try to keep it stealth-like so you're not drawing attention to it. So I go back in the woods in their disc golf course and I get it. And I'm starting to head out, and I hear somebody, help, help. So I tried to follow the voice, and I found a guy that was chained to a tree.
What?
Yeah,
he was chained to a
tree. So I walk out, and I call the campus police, and they call the county police, and come to find out this guy has had a few interesting problems, and he'd actually chained himself up.
He chained himself to the tree.
But, it was very interesting. I'd have to say it's my most unique experience.
Oh, I bet so. Yeah, you don't see a guy chained to a tree every day in the middle of the woods.
And it was actually, he's been there all night, and it was like 40 degrees that night. So,
oh, no. Wow.
Yeah. It's one of those things you didn't know whether to go help or not. You didn't know if it was a trap or somebody going to sneak up on you.
Right.
But there are a lot of great geocaches, but that's still probably my most memorable story about geocaching.
I bet so. That's a funny story. So, coming back to your testimony, how did you struggle after you became a Christian?
When I think back, I don't know if the church was legalistic or I just interpreted that into the church. I really, especially a little bit today, but not as much, but my earlier years, adult years, I really struggled with legalism. You want to do things for God, but it's like you're trying to earn God's favor, and you got this checklist that you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Instead of doing it to honor God, you're doing it because you think you got to check this off.
Right.
So I battled with that a lot in my early adult years.
Yeah. Legalism is kind of our default position, I think, as people. We grow up thinking we can kind of manage the scales of our lives.
Yes, yeah.
If we do more good than bad, then God will look and have favor on us. And then we come to realize that ain't how it works. That's not how it works at all. So tell me about how many kids do you have? What ages are they?
I have 3 boys. My oldest is Ross, who's our handicapped son, and he's 41. And then Jonathan is our middle son, who got married over a year ago, and he's 39. And then my youngest is 37, Brian.
Yeah, and you guys thought that you'd probably never have a married son, right?
Right. We were starting to wonder because he didn't get married till he's 38.
Yeah, okay. I know talking to Karen, she was beside herself sometimes.
Yeah.
We need some grandchildren.
Yeah. We were still hoping for wives at one point.
So what are you currently learning about Jesus?
But I'm really understanding better now that we need to focus on the gospel. Matter of fact, my small group is doing a series on the gospel above all by J.D. Greer.
Yeah.
We can focus on so many things, but we just need to focus on bringing the gospel, not only living out the gospel in our lives, but sharing it with others.
Mm-hmm.
You can do all kinds of Bible studies about Revelation and what's going to come, but what's going to come is going to come. We need to worry about getting everyone there.
Yeah. We've done a podcast already on suffering, and we don't want to rehash that. If you want to listen to that podcast, I'd recommend it. Mike did a great job there. But give me just a thumbnail sketch of your son Ross and why he's where he's at in terms of his disability.
When Ross was 9 months old, he was in the care of a babysitter, and the doctors think that she shook him. Either way, he convulsed, and actually they had to revive him. They take him to the hospital, and this is Crawfordsville, and then they ship him to Indianapolis, and here we're driving over to Indianapolis to try to catch because they sent him by helicopter. His brain was swelling. Back then, you didn't hear about shaken baby syndrome.
Yes. Yeah.
But he was very confident that that's kind of what had happened. A lot of the damage was down in the base of his skull. The decision was to put him into a coma. And at that time, they had never induced a coma in anybody that young. They put him into a coma because they were trying to control the swelling in his brain. So they drilled a little hole in his skull and they put a monitor in there to try to see what the pressure was. And as the pressures got too great, then they would do some medication to bring it down. He was in a coma for 14 days.
Wow.
We'd always ask him, well, what's the pressure supposed to be? They said, we don't know because no normal human's going to let us drill a hole in their head and put a monitor in there. So that was a challenge. Very good doctors. They started to try to bring him out of the coma. He was a little resistant. And then one night he just came out and they called us and said, hey, he's awake. And of course, he's only 9.5 months old. And so they told us probably over the next 2 years, if you don't see any improvement, there probably won't be. And so, we just prayed, Lord, your will. And over the next 2 years, there wasn't any. And so not that we still don't pray for his healing, but he's 41 now. We realize if God was going to do something, he probably would have done it by now.
Yeah.
And so we occasionally have people come up and say, oh, we'd like to pray for healing for your son. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Because we know God's capable. We don't think he's going to do it at this point.
Right.
But we know he's capable. And if he wants to, I'll accept the results of Ross being normal.
Sure.
It basically, his brain was damaged and it's left him to where he has no capability of learning. Physically functioning, other some minor seizures, he's fine. He just doesn't have the capability of learning. So he's confined to a wheelchair. It's like having a 9.5-month-old child. We feed him and diaper him, and Karen's the saint. I don't know how many diapers she's changed in her lifetime for us. She's the primary caregiver for him, and he's 41, and we praise God he's left us with us that long, and because you never know when you have a situation like that how their health is going to be. But he's been really very healthy and rarely gets sick, and hopefully he'll be with us a lot longer.
Yeah. I'll take your conversation in a different direction than last time on this. So I think a lot of people in church, they want to be kind and they want to love disabled persons well, but they just feel like they don't know how.
Right.
So how can people at NorthWoods love Ross well?
Ross can't see, but he loves people talking to him.
Yeah.
Touch him on the shoulder, rub his head. He likes the attention. That's probably been the one thing in all these years that's changed. His early years, unless it was a family member, he would totally ignore a stranger. He wouldn't respond to him. He wouldn't roll his eyes. He wouldn't do anything. And he's become more social in the fact that if somebody's talking to him, he might roll his eyes that way. He might tilt his head. Depending on his mood, he might smile. The other night, Wednesday night, a little girl was talking to him, and Ross, he'll do this, his right hand, he'll put his thumbs up. It may not mean anything, but it sure seems like he does it on cue many times when somebody does something. And so I said, hey, he gave you a thumbs up. And that made her day. So he hears extremely well. Sometimes if somebody says something and it's been quiet, he'll jump because he wasn't expecting,
he can't see. Yeah.
He wasn't expecting you to be there. Loves music. And we never leave him in a room unless there's some TV, music, something on to help stimulate him. Mm-hmm. But other than sleep, obviously, we let him sleep.
Yeah. Well, that's good because I know that a lot of people want to be able to love him well. They just don't know how. Right. I've had the experience when I've come up and said, hi, Ross, and he jumps in his chair because apparently I'm a ninja in my house that I just am able to sneak around a little bit. Well, let's go to some fun questions. So what is the first concert that you've attended?
We've only attended 3.
Oh, wow. So
I'll tell you off. And it also kind of explains our taste in music. When we were first married, we attended a Statler Brothers concert that was at a state fair, Indiana State Fair. And then a few years later, on one of our anniversaries, we went to a Barry Manilow concert in Indianapolis.
Fred, that was the first concert that he ever attended.
And then just a few years ago, we went to a Mercy Me concert.
Yeah.
I'm very diverse in my music. I like a lot of classic rock, a little bit of country. I'm not a big country guy.
Mm-hmm.
Love Christian music, especially Mercy Me is my favorite group.
Awesome. I've seen them before. They put on a great show.
Yeah.
And you can always count on the last song. It's going to be I Can Only Imagine.
Right, yes.
Did the Statler brothers, are they the ones that sang Elvira?
I think so. Yeah, it was actually the Statler brothers and who was the other? There was a lady that was with them. I just had her voice. But anyway, it was a double feature there.
Yeah.
Barbara Mandrell.
And
the Statler brothers.
Wow, that goes way back.
It was way back. That was right after we were married.
Right. That definitely is the Barry Manilow type era.
Yeah.
What is the worst food ever?
I don't like beets. I was on business with my company, and we were at this really nice restaurant, and they had this beet soup, and they had something else. I thought, well, I'll try the beet soup. I mean, it's a fancy restaurant. It's got to be good. It's one of the worst things I ever tasted in my life. So I'm not a big beet person.
Yeah, I can eat them on a salad, maybe, with a lot of dressing, but, just raw by themselves or cooked by themselves, no thanks. I had an aunt that used to drink beet juice.
Really?
Yeah. And it's a very Russian name. It's called borscht or something like that. And no thank you. That was just gross. Who is someone that you miss?
I miss my dad. My dad died. He was 57. And so I was only 31 at the time. And so I miss him a lot. In our earlier years, it was raising family and we'd talk about sports and we worked together part of the time and we talked about work. But we really, about the time he got ill, started to talk about life in general and more stuff. And so I miss not having him to talk to.
Yeah. I think as your kids get older, you become more collegial and less parenty. And that's a fun phase of life to be in. What profession would you like to try other than making lids?
I've always loved sports. Being a golf caddy or something to be around sports would be great. I don't think there's professional geocachers, so that wouldn't work.
You could start it.
Yeah.
Who can get the best time on that?
Yeah.
Maybe you and Bobby could be sportscasters together.
That might be.
Yeah, work that out. All right. What do you do to relax? I think we probably covered that.
Well, geocaching right now is a lot. I used to golf a lot, and that was always good to take out frustrations because you get to hit that little white ball. But yeah, to now it's more geocaching, although we've got most of them in this area, so we have to kind of spread out, travel a little bit to get newer ones. But that's relaxing for us now and something Karen and I can do together.
Yeah, it's good to have a hobby together. Who do you think's more into it, you or Karen?
Oh, I am. I mean, when we first started it and we were looking for them, I'd have to have 5 to 10. I couldn't just do one and go home. And she enjoys it.
Yeah.
But even with the wrestling, when we got into the pairing, she went along because of me. But she wouldn't have done it on her own.
Yeah.
So
it's a sign of a good wife to tolerate.
Oh, when I took up golf, she took up golf. When I would go bowling, she'd go. Well, she is great because we could always find something to do together.
Yeah. What is your favorite music album?
I don't know if I have a favorite album per se. I like more songs. I don't know how many people have heard of Bread. They did If, and we had that song in our wedding. Again, I love Bart Milner and Mercy Me. They have some great songs, Even If. I remember talking to the high school kids about that, and then shortly after they came out with that song, it's like, because those guys said, hey, even if we're going to worship you, Lord.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge for all of us, no matter what we're going through, to still worship God.
This is funny. Kind of the running joke in my house right now is Mercy Me has that song, Say I Won't. And so if somebody in our house says, you can't do that, we'll respond, say I won't. And so Mercy Me lives on inside our house. What is your favorite dessert?
I love pies and cobblers. Probably my default is pecan pie.
Oh, yeah.
But I love a good peach cobbler. That's good, too. Of course, got to watch the sugar these days.
Yeah. What is your favorite thing Karen makes?
She makes a pretty good brownie. And I love brownies, too. But again,
and watch the sugar.
You got to watch the sugar these days.
Don't we all? You get older, you got to watch everything that...
Your body just doesn't hold up, starts breaking down.
Right, exactly. Well, Mike, thanks for joining us today, and hopefully you guys learned some new stuff about Mike. We've got one more elder to do, and that's Tim Cook. And so we'll get to him next, and thanks for joining us again. Thanks for tuning in to the NorthWoods Church Matters podcast. If you'd like to find out more about NorthWoods Church, you can visit us at our website, www.northwoodschurch.org. Again, that's www.northwoodschurch.org.